I'm Thalia, 32, a former kindergarten teacher who married into the wealthy Sanders family. When I said I do in that gorgeous lakeside ceremony, I truly believed my fairy tale had just begun. I never imagined my mother-in-law would one day corner me in my own kitchen and threaten to destroy everything I loved unless I divorced her son. The choice I made that day changed all our lives, but nothing prepared me for what happened when I finally signed those divorce papers. If you're watching this, please hit like and subscribe and let me know in the comments where you're watching from as I share how the woman who vowed to ruin my life broke down in a way that shocked us all. Growing up in a middle-class neighborhood in Seattle, I never imagined I would marry into one of the city's wealthiest families. My parents were hardworking people, dad a plumber and mum a nurse, who instilled in me the values of honesty, compassion, and the importance of education. These values guided me to become a kindergarten teacher, a profession I adored with my whole heart. I met James Sanders at a charity auction for the elementary school where I taught. The school needed funds for a new playground, and James was there representing his family's company as a major donor. He stood out immediately, not just because of his tailored suit that probably cost more than my monthly rent, but because of how he genuinely listened to the children sharing their playground dreams. "You really care about these kids," he said to me after watching me interact with my students. "They're the reason I get up every morning," I replied honestly. James was everything I wasn't used to, heir to Sanders Technology Solutions, educated at exclusive private schools, followed by Stanford University, and groomed from birth to eventually take over the family empire. Despite our different backgrounds, we connected instantly. His genuine laugh and the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled at my jokes made my heart flutter in ways I'd never experienced. Our first date was at a small Italian restaurant, where James confessed he was tired of pretentious business dinners and just wanted authentic food and conversation. 3 months of dating followed, filled with walks along the waterfront, surprise picnics, and long conversations about our dreams. James talked about modernizing his family's business, while I shared my passion for early childhood development. When James proposed 6 months later with a family heirloom ring, I was overwhelmed with joy. That's when I first met his family properly, particularly his mother, Eleanor Sanders. The Sanders family lived in a sprawling mansion overlooking Lake Washington. Walking through their front door felt like entering another world. Marble floors, priceless artwork, and staff who moved silently through the house maintaining perfect order. Eleanor Sanders was the epitome of old money and sophistication. Tall, slender, with perfectly coiffed silver blonde hair and impeccable posture, she greeted me with a practiced smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "So you're the teacher who's captured my son's heart," she said, taking my hands in hers. Her grip was cool and firm. James has always had a soft spot for community service. I didn't quite know how to take that comment, but chose to see the best in it. William James's father was warmer, a tall man with James's smile who seemed genuinely interested in my work with children. The wedding planning began almost immediately, with Eleanor taking charge in a way that seemed helpful at first. She had connections with the best venues, florists, and caterers in Seattle. Although I occasionally felt steamrolled by her decisions, James assured me this was his mother's way of welcoming me to the family. "She just wants everything to be perfect for us," he would say. "Trust me, it's easier to let her handle it." Our wedding was straight out of a magazine. 300 guests, a custom gown, and a reception at the Sanders Country Club. Throughout the celebration, Eleanor remained by my side, introducing me to important business associates and family friends. If her smile seemed strained at times, I attributed it to the stress of the event. After our honeymoon in the Maldives, we moved into a beautiful craftsman house, not far from the Sanders family home. Although James had offered to buy us something larger, I had fallen in love with this charming place that felt like a home rather than a statement of wealth. Eleanor had frowned slightly at our choice, but said nothing directly to me. The first few months of marriage were blissful. James was attentive and loving, often bringing home little surprises or sending flowers to my classroom. We would cook dinner together in our cozy kitchen, talking about our days and planning our future. We both wanted children, agreeing to try after our first anniversary when we'd had time to settle into married life. I continued teaching, loving every moment with my kindergarteners. James seemed proud of my dedication, often bragging to his friends about my wife, the teacher who's changing lives one 5-year-old at a time. I truly believed I had it all: a loving husband, a fulfilling career, and a beautiful home. The differences in our backgrounds seemed insignificant in the face of our happiness. If only I had recognized the warning signs that were already there, hidden beneath the surface of our perfect beginning. The subtle way Eleanor would inspect our home when visiting, the questions about when I might consider a more suitable career for someone married to a Sanders, the comments about my charming but simple family. But love and optimism blinded me to what was coming. I couldn't see that Eleanor Sanders had very different plans for her son's life, plans that didn't include a kindergarten teacher from a middle-class family, and she was just getting started. The first real sign that something was wrong came during a Sunday brunch at the Sanders family home, about 3 months after our wedding. These brunches had become a tradition, and while they were always formal affairs that made me slightly uncomfortable, I was determined to embrace James's family customs. That particular Sunday, I'd worn a floral dress I'd found on sale paired with a cardigan and simple jewelry. When Eleanor saw me, her eyes narrowed slightly. "Darling, is that from last season's collection?" She asked, her voice sweet, but her eyes critical. "We really must take you shopping. A Sanders wife needs to present a certain image." Before I could respond, she turned to the housekeeper. "Maria, please note that we need to schedule a stylist appointment for Thalia. Perhaps Sophia can work her magic." James squeezed my hand under the table. "Mum Thalia looks beautiful as always, he said. But there was a note of resignation in his voice that bothered me. Later that week, Eleanor arranged a lunch just for us girls at an exclusive restaurant downtown. I tried to see it as an opportunity to bond with my mother-in-law. "I hope we can get to know each other better," I said earnestly as we were seated at her regular table. "That's precisely my intention," Eleanor replied, studying me over her menu. "James is our only child, our legacy. I need to understand the woman he's chosen." Throughout lunch, Eleanor peppered me with questions about my upbringing, education, and career choices. With each answer, her lips pressed into a thinner line. "Teaching is admirable, of course," she said after I enthusiastically described a breakthrough with one of my struggling students. "But surely you don't intend to continue now that you're married. The Sanders name comes with certain social responsibilities that would conflict with such a demanding schedule." "I love teaching, I replied firmly, "and James supports my career." Eleanor dabbed her lips with her napkin. "James has always been idealistic, but realities of position eventually set in dear." The shopping trip that followed was equally uncomfortable. Eleanor dismissed my style preferences and had salespeople bring increasingly expensive and conservative outfits that better suited a Sanders wife. When I returned home that evening, emotionally exhausted and carrying bags of clothes I didn't particularly like, James seemed distracted by work. When I tried to discuss my concerns about his mother, he waved them away. "That's just how Mom is," he said, not looking up from his laptop. "She means well. She just wants you to fit in with their social circle." I tried to take his advice over the following weeks, attempting to bond with Eleanor through more lunches and shopping trips. But the criticism continued. Subtle comments about my mannerisms, the way I spoke, even how I arranged flowers in our home. Then came the day I discovered something truly disturbing. I was at the Sanders home, waiting for Eleanor to finish a phone call before our planned lunch, when I noticed a folder with my name on her desk. Curiosity got the better of me, and I peeked inside. It was a comprehensive background check, not just on me, but on my entire family going back 3 generations. My hands trembled as I flipped through pages detailing my parents' financials, my cousin's minor arrest during college, even my childhood medical records. I quickly closed the folder when I heard Eleanor's footsteps. Throughout lunch, my stomach was in knots, but I said nothing, unsure how to confront her about what I'd seen. That evening, at a family dinner, Eleanor brought up my family in a way that now seemed calculated. "Thalia, didn't you mention your maternal grandfather was from Missouri?" she asked innocently. "Arkansas, actually," I corrected. Arkansas," she repeated, exchanging a glance with William. "Coal country, wasn't it? Quite a different world from Seattle society." The implication hung in the air. I came from people who worked with their hands, people who didn't belong in the world of the Sanders. James started working longer hours around this time, often coming home after I was already in bed. When he was home, he seemed distant, constantly checking his phone and responding to his mother's frequent calls and texts. One afternoon, Eleanor stopped by unannounced while James was at work. "Just checking on things," she said, walking through our home with an appraising eye. "James mentioned you've been redecorating. I wanted to make sure you weren't overwhelming yourself." I hadn't been redecorating at all. It was a transparent excuse to inspect our home. The breaking point came when I overheard a conversation between Eleanor and James that they didn't know I could hear. I had arrived early to another family dinner and was about to enter William's study when I heard my name. "James, darling, I know you care for Thalia." Eleanor was saying, but you must admit you married beneath your station. Your father and I had such hopes for an alliance with the Winstons or the Bennets, someone who understands our world. Mother, please, James responded, but his protest sounded weak, obligatory. All I'm saying is that it's not too late to reconsider. No real damage has been done yet. I backed away from the door, heart pounding. That night I called my best friend Sarah, tears streaming down my face. I don't know what to do, I confessed. It's like she's trying to erase who I am, and James isn't standing up for me. Am I overreacting? You're not overreacting, Sarah assured me. Eleanor sounds controlling and James needs to put his foot down. I tried to talk to James that night, but he dismissed my concerns again. You're being sensitive, he said. Mum is just old-fashioned. Give it time. But time I was beginning to realize would only make things worse. Eleanor's campaign against me was just beginning, and I had no idea how far she would go to protect the Sanders legacy from someone she considered an interloper. When I discovered I was pregnant 5 months into our marriage, I was overjoyed. Despite the growing tension with Eleanor, I believed a baby might bridge the gap between us. This child would be her grandchild after all. Surely that would change things. I planned a special dinner to tell James, cooking his favorite meal and placing a tiny pair of baby shoes beside his plate. When he saw them, his face lit up in a way I hadn't seen in months. Really? He asked, eyes wide with wonder. When I nodded, he swept me into his arms, spinning me around our kitchen. This is amazing news. I'm going to be a father. For a moment, I had my James back. The man who looked at me with unbridled love and joy rather than conflicted loyalty. We should tell your parents right away, I suggested, caught up in his enthusiasm. We drove to the Sanders estate that very night, both of us bubbling with excitement. William reacted with genuine happiness, hugging me warmly and clapping James on the back. Eleanor, however, received the news with a tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. Well, she said after a moment of uncomfortable silence, this is certainly sooner than expected. I hope you've considered what this means for your career, Thalia. And James, the company is at such a crucial expansion phase. Mother, James said, his voice firm for once. We're having a baby, your grandchild. Can you just be happy for us? Eleanor composed herself quickly. Of course, darling, I'm simply concerned about timing. But what's done is done. We'll need to prepare. And prepare she did. Within a week, Eleanor had taken over every aspect of my pregnancy. She scheduled appointments with the most exclusive obstetrician in Seattle without consulting me. She began redesigning one of our guest rooms as a nursery, ordering custom furniture from Europe. The Sanders heir deserves the best, she declared, when I suggested we might want to choose things ourselves. When I expressed a desire for a natural birth with minimal interventions, Eleanor scoffed. Absolutely not. Dr. Walters has delivered babies for all the best families in Seattle. He'll schedule you for a C-section at the appropriate time. Much more civilized, dear. But I want to try for a natural birth, I insisted. It's my body and our baby. Eleanor patted my hand condescendingly. You don't know what you're talking about. This isn't one of your little kindergarten projects where you can experiment. The arguments with James began in earnest then. I begged him to stand up to his mother to respect my wishes regarding my own pregnancy and our child. Can't you see she's taking over everything, I cried. This is our baby, not hers. She's just trying to help, James would reply, though I could see the conflict in his eyes. She knows about these things. Her connections ensure we get the best care. The situation escalated when Eleanor hired Vivian Peters, a family consultant, who specialized in working with elite families. Vivian began showing up at our home several times a week to monitor my diet, exercise, and even my emotional state. Eleanor is concerned about your stress levels, Vivian explained during one of her unwelcome visits. Stress is bad for the baby's development. Perhaps you should consider taking a leave from your teaching position earlier than planned. I loved my job. My kindergartners brought me joy and purpose, especially as my home life became increasingly stressful. But Eleanor launched a campaign to convince James that my working was harmful to the baby. The classroom is full of germs, she would say, and all that standing can't be good for the baby. James, you need to insist she stop working. The pressure built from both sides until one evening, James came home with a determined expression. I've spoken with the school principal, he announced. They've agreed to let you take an early leave starting next week. Full pay, of course. I made a donation to ensure it. You did what? I asked, incredulous. Without even talking to me first. It's for the best, Thalia. Think of the baby. I burst into tears, feeling the last bit of my independence slipping away. This isn't about the baby. This is about your mother controlling our lives and you letting her. Despite my protests, I found myself at home full-time by my 4th month of pregnancy. Eleanor and Vivian now had unlimited access to me. My friends stopped calling because I always had to cancel plans due to some Sanders family obligation. Even Sarah's calls became less frequent, as Eleanor made it clear she disapproved of my common friendships. My world shrank to the walls of our house with Eleanor as the gatekeeper. She began making financial decisions without consulting me, as well setting up trust funds and investment accounts for the baby with stipulations I wasn't allowed to see. "These are family matters," she said dismissively when I asked for details. "James understands the arrangements." But James was becoming increasingly absent, working late and attending business dinners. When he was home, he was distracted and distant. The joy of our pregnancy announcement seemed like a distant memory. One night, I found myself staring at my reflection in our bathroom mirror, barely recognizing the woman looking back at me. My teacher's badge sat unused in a drawer. My phone rarely rang with calls from friends. Even my wardrobe had been replaced with appropriate maternity clothes selected by Eleanor. "What's happening to me?" I whispered to my reflection, tears sliding down my cheeks. Depression was setting in a grey cloud that followed me from room to room. I was losing myself piece by piece, and my unborn child deserved better than a mother hollowed out by someone else's expectations. Little did I know that Eleanor was about to escalate her campaign against me in a way I could never have imagined. The control and isolation had been just the beginning. She was preparing to deliver an ultimatum that would shatter what remained of my world. The day that changed everything came when James was away on a business trip to New York. He'd been gone for 3 days, and I was actually enjoying the reprieve from the tension that now constantly hung between us. I was sitting in our kitchen sipping tea and looking through a book of baby names when I heard the distinct sound of Eleanor's car pulling into our driveway. I sighed, mentally preparing myself for another session of criticism and unwanted advice. But nothing could have prepared me for what happened next. Eleanor entered without knocking. She had a key, of course, though I'd never given her one. She was more formally dressed than usual in a tailored charcoal suit, her expression cold and determined. "Thalia, we need to talk," she said, setting her designer handbag on the counter with a decisive click. "This has gone on long enough." "What has?" I asked, one protective hand moving instinctively to my growing baby bump. Eleanor sat across from me, her posture rigid. "This marriage, this charade, it's time to end it before more damage is done." "Qu'est-ce?" I stared at her, certain I'd misheard. "Excuse me, I want you to divorce James," she stated flatly. Quietly and with minimal fuss. The room seemed to tilt around me. "You can't be serious." "I've never been more serious in my life," Eleanor continued, her voice unnervingly calm. "I've prepared a generous settlement offer, more than someone of your background could expect. You'll be well provided for, and arrangements will be made for the child." "Arrangements?" I echoed, my voice barely audible. "This is my baby, our baby. I'm James's wife." Eleanor's expression hardened. "A wife who doesn't belong in this family. A wife who would eventually embarrass the Sanders name. I tried to mold you, Thalia. I truly did. But it's become clear that you'll never truly fit." "This is insane," I said, pushing back from the table. "James and I love each other. We're having a baby. You can't just demand a divorce." "Actually, I can." Eleanor reached into her bag and removed a manila folder. "Because if you don't agree to my terms, I'll be forced to take more drastic measures." She opened the folder and slid it toward me. Inside were pages of information about my family, much more detailed than what I'd glimpsed in her office months ago. Your Uncle Thomas's tax problems from 2012. Your cousin Lisa's experimental treatment for depression. Your father's gambling phase after your mother's surgery. Eleanor recited these private family matters with clinical detachment. Nothing terrible on its own, perhaps, but together enough to create quite an unflattering picture. My hands trembled as I looked at the invasive collection of my family's private struggles. "You've been investigating my entire family. How dare you?" "I protect what's mine, Thalia. The Sanders name means something in this city. It opens doors, creates opportunities. I won't have it tarnished." "By me?" I asked, anger beginning to cut through my shock. "By a kindergarten teacher who loves your son." "Love?" Eleanor scoffed. "What does that matter against centuries of legacy James will get over you? He's a Sanders first, a husband second. He always has been. My mind raced to James, desperately wishing he were here. James won't agree to this. You can't make this decision for him. Eleanor's smile was chilling. Can't I? Who do you think suggested this business trip? James trusts my judgment. He always has. You're threatening me, I said, finally naming what was happening. This is blackmail. I prefer to think of it as negotiation. Divorce James, quietly take the settlement, and your family's privacy remains intact. Refuse. She left the threat hanging. I won't do it, I said, finding strength in my anger. I'll call James right now and tell him everything. I reached for my phone, but Eleanor remained unfazed. Go ahead. His phone is being monitored. It has been for months. I froze, remembering all the times I'd called James with concerns about his mother, all the text messages that had gone unanswered or received only brief replies. You've been intercepting my communications with my husband. The violation was staggering. Protecting him from your attempts to turn him against his family, Eleanor corrected. The monitoring was his father's idea, actually. William may seem softer, but he understands what's at stake. The walls seemed to be closing in. I struggled to breathe, my chest tightening painfully. I don't believe you, I gasped, but my denial sounded hollow even to my own ears. Believe what you will, the facts remain. Eleanor stood, smoothing her immaculate suit. You have 48 hours to decide. The settlement offer is generous now. It won't be if I have to resort to other methods. She walked to the door, then turned back. And Talia, if you're thinking of fighting me, remember that I have connections throughout the city. Medical boards, school administrations, banking institutions. I would hate for your family to suffer from your stubbornness. After she left, I collapsed onto the kitchen floor, a panic attack overwhelming me. My breath came in short, painful gasps, spots dancing before my eyes. My phone slipped from my trembling fingers as I tried to call anyone for help. The next thing I remember is waking up in the emergency room, a concerned doctor leaning over me. Mrs. Sanders, you experienced a severe panic attack, she explained. Your blood pressure spiked dangerously. We need to monitor you and the baby carefully. The baby, my precious child already caught in this nightmare. Tears streamed down my face as a nurse patted my hand sympathetically. Is there someone we can call for you? She asked. I thought of James, unreachable and possibly complicit. Of Eleanor, who had caused this. Of my parents, who would be devastated and might become targets of Eleanor's vengeance. Sarah Davis, I finally said, thinking of my best friend. Please call Sarah. Later that evening, from the safety of Sarah's apartment, I made desperate attempts to reach James. Calls went straight to voicemail. Emails received automatic replies about being out of the office. Even our mutual friends couldn't seem to get through to him. Lying awake in Sarah's guest room, hands cradling my belly, I faced the terrifying truth Eleanor had effectively isolated me from everyone who might help. She had been methodically cutting me off from my support system for months, and now she was ready to remove me from their lives completely. The choice before me seemed impossible. Fight a woman with unlimited resources and risk my family's well-being, or give up the life and marriage I thought I had. All while trying to protect the innocent child growing inside me. What Eleanor didn't realize was that her ultimatum had awakened something in me, a fierce protective instinct that transcended my fear. If she wanted a fight, she would get one, but I would need to be smart, strategic. I couldn't outspend her or outmaneuver her through conventional means. I placed my hand on my stomach, feeling a resolute kick from my baby. I'll protect you, I whispered, no matter what it takes. The next week passed in a blur of anxiety and desperate planning. I remained at Sarah's apartment, afraid to return to the house I shared with James. Eleanor's 48-hour deadline came and went, but I couldn't bring myself to contact her or agree to her demands. Instead, I focused on gathering what resources I could. On my 4th day at Sarah's, I discovered something that sent a fresh wave of horror through me. While trying to access my medical records through the patient portal to send to a new obstetrician, I found that someone else had recently viewed my entire medical history, including notes from my most recent emergency room visit. The account access was from a computer registered to Sanders Technology. The hospital's IT security person confirmed when I called in a panic. It was logged in under your credentials, so no privacy violation was flagged. Eleanor had accessed my medical records. She knew about the panic attack, the concerns about my blood pressure, everything the doctors had said about my pregnancy. The invasion felt complete. She had access to my home, my husband, and now even my most private health information. I was still reeling from this discovery when James finally returned from his trip. Instead of coming home, he called and asked to meet at a neutral location, a cafe downtown. When I arrived, my heart sank at the sight of him. He looked tired, conflicted, and somehow diminished. "Where have you been staying?" he asked after an awkward greeting. "I came home to an empty house." "At Sarah's," I replied. "After your mother threatened me and I ended up in the emergency room." James flinched. "Mom said you two had a disagreement, but I didn't know about the hospital. Why didn't you call me?" "I tried, James, dozens of times. My calls never reached you." He looked away, guilt flashing across his face. "The reception was bad in New York, and I was in meetings constantly." "Your mother is monitoring our communications," I said flatly. "She told me so herself when she demanded I divorce you." James's head snapped up, genuine shock in his eyes. "Divorce? What are you talking about?" I recounted the entire confrontation. The threats, the folder of family information, the ultimatum. With each detail, James's expression cycled between disbelief, anger, and a terrible, resigned understanding. "She wouldn't go that far," he said, but his protest sounded hollow. "She's protective, yes, but she wouldn't interfere like that." "She already has, James. She's been interfering from day one, and now she's threatening my family if I don't leave you." He ran his hands through his hair, a gesture of frustration I knew well. "I'll talk to her. This is a misunderstanding. She just wants what's best for us for the baby." "No, James. She wants what's best for the Sanders name. There's a difference." Our conversation was interrupted by a call on James's phone. He glanced at it, hesitated, then answered. "Yes, Mother. I'm with her now." A pause. "No, I understand. Yes, I'll be there." He hung up, looking defeated. "There's a family emergency. Father needs me at the house." "Is William okay?" I asked, genuinely concerned about my father-in-law. "It's a business matter," James said vaguely. "I have to go." As he stood to leave, I grabbed his hand. "James, you need to choose. Your mother is trying to destroy our marriage. Are you going to let her—" He looked at me, conflict written across his face. "It's not that simple, Thalia. The family business, our legacy. My father depends on me now. And your wife, your child. Do we mean less than the family business?" He leaned down and kissed my forehead. "We'll figure this out, I promise. Just give me time to talk to them." But as I watched him walk away, responding immediately to his mother's call, I knew with crushing certainty that James had already made his choice. He might not admit it even to himself, but he would always choose the Sanders family over me. The next day, I made an appointment with a lawyer recommended by one of Sarah's colleagues. Patricia Winters was known for handling high-profile divorces and had a reputation for standing firm against wealthy opponents. "Your mother-in-law has no legal standing to force a divorce," Patricia assured me after hearing my story. "But I'm concerned about these threats against your family. Have you considered a restraining order?" Before I could answer, my phone rang with an unknown number. Warily, I answered. "Mrs. Sanders," an unfamiliar female voice asked. "This is Dr. Levinson's office calling. We noticed you've accessed your records to transfer to another provider. Dr. Levinson would like you to know that if you're concerned about the quality of care, he'd be happy to discuss this with you personally." Dr. Levinson was the obstetrician Eleanor had chosen, one I'd never felt comfortable with, but had been pressured to accept. "Thank you, but I've made my decision," I replied. "I understand. It's just that Mrs. Sanders Sr. was quite insistent that you receive the best care. She's a major hospital benefactor, as you know." The implication was clear. Eleanor was tracking my medical decisions and applying pressure through her connections. After ending the call, I looked at Patricia with renewed determination. Eleanor isn't just threatening, she's actively interfering in every aspect of my life. Patricia's expression hardened. "Then we need to move quickly. I recommend filing for temporary sole custody of your child when born given the circumstances." Sole custody. The idea sent a pang through my heart. Despite everything, I hadn't wanted to separate James from his child. "As a precautionary measure," Patricia clarified. "Based on what you've told me, I'm concerned that your mother-in-law might try to seek grandparent rights or influence custody arrangements." The thought of Eleanor having any legal claim to my baby sent a chill through me. "Do whatever you need to protect my child." 2 days later, James requested a family meeting at his parents' home. Despite my lawyer's advice to avoid private meetings, I agreed, hoping against hope, that James had finally stood up to his mother. I arrived at the Sanders estate to find James, Eleanor, and William waiting in the formal living room. Eleanor sat regally on an antique settee, while William stood by the fireplace looking uncomfortable. James paced nervously. "Thank you for coming, Thalia," William said, the first to acknowledge my presence. Eleanor cut straight to the point. James tells me you've consulted a divorce attorney, so you're accepting my offer. I consulted an attorney because you threatened me and my family, I replied, remaining standing despite William's gesture toward a chair, and because my husband seems unable to protect me from you. That's unfair, James protested weakly. Is it? I turned to face him. Your mother demanded I divorce you, or she would destroy my family. She's monitoring my medical records, intercepting our communications, and threatening my career. What have you done about any of that? James looked to his father for support, but William's gaze was fixed on the carpet. Thalia, Eleanor said, her voice dangerously soft. This melodrama is precisely why you don't fit with this family. We handle matters privately with dignity, not with accusations and scenes. You threatened my family, I repeated. Where's the dignity in that? I presented options, Eleanor corrected. The consequences of your choices are your responsibility. Mother, please, James interjected. Can't we discuss this reasonably? Thalia is carrying your grandchild. Eleanor's expression hardened. A Sanders grandchild who deserves a proper upbringing, which I'm beginning to think might be best accomplished without Thalia's influence. The implication hit me like a physical blow. Are you suggesting you would try to take my baby? I'm suggesting that a Sanders child belongs in the Sanders family, Eleanor replied coldly. With or without you is your choice. I looked at James, waiting for him to defend me, to reject his mother's outrageous statement. He opened his mouth, closed it, then said weakly, Mother, that's going too far. Is it? Eleanor challenged. You yourself expressed concerns about Thalia's emotional stability after her hospital visit, her family history of mental health issues, her suitability as a mother. I never said that, James protested, but his eyes couldn't meet mine. In that moment, everything became crystal clear. James would never choose me over his mother. He might feel conflicted, he might even love me in his way, but he was completely under Eleanor's control and always would be. I'm filing for divorce, I announced, the words burning my throat. Not because you threatened me, Eleanor, but because I deserve better than a husband who won't stand up for me or our child. Thalia, no. James began moving toward me. I backed away. It's done, James. I can't bring a child into this toxic environment. I won't let our baby grow up watching their father be manipulated and controlled, or worse, learning to do the same to others. Eleanor's expression remained impassive, but a glint of triumph shone in her eyes. A wise decision, finally. My attorney will contact yours to discuss terms. I have my own terms, I informed her, and they don't include you having any access to my child. As I turned to leave, William finally spoke. Thalia, wait. But I was already walking out the door, my decision made. The life I had thought I wanted was overshadowed by manipulation and control disguised as family loyalty. The path ahead was terrifying. Single motherhood, a legal battle with one of the wealthiest families in Seattle. But staying would mean surrendering my soul and potentially my child's future. As I drove away from the Sanders estate, tears blurring my vision, I felt something unexpected beneath the pain and fear, a flicker of relief. For the first time in months, I had made a choice for myself. I had refused to be controlled. And somehow, I would find a way to protect my baby from Eleanor Sanders, no matter what it took. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of legal consultations and practical arrangements. Patricia helped me file for divorce, citing irreconcilable differences rather than the full ugly truth. I moved my remaining belongings out of the house James and I had shared, storing most of them in Sarah's garage, while I stayed in her spare room. I expected the Sanders family to retaliate immediately, to make good on Eleanor's threats. Instead, something unexpected happened. 3 days after I filed the divorce papers, I received a call from William Sanders. Thalia, I know you have every reason to hang up, he began when I answered warily, but I'm calling without Eleanor's knowledge. Could we meet? There are things you should know. Curiosity overrode my caution, and I agreed to meet him at a small cafe far from the Sanders' usual haunts. William looked different away from Eleanor's influence. Older, wearier, but somehow more human. He ordered coffee for both of us, then sat heavily in the chair across from me. First, I want to apologize, he said, his voice gravelly with emotion. What Eleanor did to you was wrong. What I allowed to happen through my silence was wrong. I remained guarded. Why are you telling me this now? William sighed deeply. Because I've watched this happen before. 3 times to be exact. You're not the first woman James has loved who Eleanor deemed unsuitable. This revelation stunned me. 3 times, but James never mentioned any serious relationships before me. He wouldn't remember them that way. Eleanor has a gift for revising history, for making James believe her version of events. The first was his college girlfriend Amelia, brilliant law student but from a working-class background. The second was Sophia, a doctor he met during his brief rebellion phase. The third was Lauren, a journalist who asked too many questions about the family business. What happened to them? I asked, though I could guess. Each one was systematically removed from James's life. Opportunities mysteriously arose to take them elsewhere. Family emergencies called James away at crucial moments. Doubts were planted, then nurtured into full-grown insecurities. And James never saw the pattern because Eleanor always positioned herself as the supportive mother, never the orchestrator. I absorbed this information silently, pieces of my own experience falling into place. But you're different, William continued. You fought back. And more importantly, you're carrying James's child. Eleanor wasn't prepared for that complication. Why are you telling me this? I asked again. Why now? William looked down at his hands, liver-spotted and slightly trembling. Because Eleanor's behavior has escalated beyond what I can justify to myself. And because there are things about Eleanor you need to understand if you're going to protect yourself and your child. He took a deep breath before continuing. Before James was born, we had a daughter, Elizabeth. She lived for only 3 days, a congenital heart defect that couldn't be repaired. Eleanor never recovered from that loss, not really. When James came along 2 years later, her grief transformed into something obsessive, an unyielding determination that nothing would ever hurt her child or the Sanders legacy again. My hand instinctively moved to my baby bump, a surge of empathy rising despite everything Eleanor had done. That doesn't excuse her behavior, William said, reading my expression, but it might help you understand the depth of what you're dealing with. Eleanor doesn't see herself as malicious. In her mind, she's protecting what matters most at any cost. Why have you stayed with her? I couldn't help asking. If you see what she does, why remain part of it? William's smile was sad. For James. I thought I could moderate her influence, provide some balance. I failed at that clearly, and now I'm trying to make amends in what small way I can. He slid a business card across the table. This is Andrew Pearson, a lawyer who doesn't owe the Sanders family any favors. He specializes in complex family law. He's expecting your call. As our meeting ended, William made one last request. Don't tell James we met. Not yet. He's more deeply under Eleanor's influence than he knows, and I need time to help him see the truth. I left that meeting with my mind reeling. The picture William had painted of Eleanor was both more disturbing and more human than I had imagined. A woman transformed by grief into someone capable of destroying others to protect what she loved. It didn't excuse her actions, but it gave me insight into what I was truly facing. I called Andrew Pearson that afternoon, and he agreed to work with Patricia on my case. With their combined expertise, I began to feel a glimmer of hope that I might actually win against the Sanders family. The divorce proceedings moved forward with the Sanders lawyers offering increasingly generous financial settlements in exchange for various forms of control over my child, visitation rights for the grandparents, education decisions, even a clause about where I could live with the baby. I rejected them all. One morning, I received a text from an unknown number. Not all Sanders agree with E's actions. Stay strong. I suspected it was from William, but couldn't be certain. At 6 months pregnant, I experienced another frightening health scare. Sudden swelling and elevated blood pressure that sent me back to the emergency room. As the doctors monitored me, I felt terrified not just for my health, but for my baby's future. What would happen to my child if something happened to me? Would Eleanor swoop in and take control? In the quiet hospital room, I made a decision. I would not live in fear of Eleanor Sanders anymore. I would not allow her threats to dictate my choices or shadow my child's life. Whatever her pain, whatever her motivations, she had no right to control me or my baby. When I was released from the hospital the next day, I had a voicemail waiting from an unexpected source. James. Thalia? His voice sounded strained, uncertain. I heard about the hospital. Are you okay? Is the baby okay? I miss you. I'm trying to understand everything that's happened. Can we talk, please? I played the message twice, trying to gauge his sincerity. Was this James reaching out independently, or another of Eleanor's manipulations? Either way, I wasn't ready to engage. My priority had to be my health and my child's well-being. As my due date approached, the legal battle intensified. Eleanor's tactics became more aggressive with her lawyers, suggesting that my emotional instability might make me an unfit mother. They presented the emergency room visits as evidence twisted, to imply that I couldn't handle the stress of pregnancy, let alone motherhood. But Eleanor had underestimated the community I had built. My fellow teachers submitted statements about my exceptional care for children. My doctor provided clear medical records showing that my health issues were directly related to stress caused by the Sanders family's actions. Sarah and other friends testified to my stability and strength under extraordinary pressure. Piece by piece, we built a case not just for divorce, but for protective orders against Eleanor's interference. The final divorce hearing was scheduled for 2 weeks before my due date, a timeline that made me nervous, but that my lawyers assured me was necessary to establish legal protections before the baby arrived. As I prepared for that final confrontation, I reflected on the journey that had brought me here. I had entered the Sanders family believing in a fairy tale romance, only to discover a nightmare of control and manipulation. I had nearly lost myself trying to fit into Eleanor's vision of a Sanders wife. But in fighting back and choosing myself and my child, I had found a strength I never knew I possessed. Whatever happened in that courtroom, I knew one thing with absolute certainty: Eleanor Sanders would not control my child's life the way she had controlled her son's. Some cycles were meant to be broken, and this one would end with me. The morning of the final divorce hearing arrived with an appropriately dramatic Seattle downpour. Sarah helped me dress in a conservative maternity dress that Patricia had advised would present the right image in court. At 8 months pregnant, I felt physically uncomfortable but emotionally resolved. "You've got this," Sarah assured me, squeezing my hand as we met Patricia and Andrew outside the courthouse. "Remember, you're not just fighting for yourself anymore." The Sanders family had arrived before us, their presence announced by a sleek black town car with a driver. Inside the courtroom, they presented a unified front. Eleanor immaculate in a designer suit, William solemn beside her, and James looking torn and miserable in the middle. I avoided making eye contact with any of them as I took my seat with my legal team. The proceedings began with the standard formalities, both sides presenting their final statements to the judge. The Sanders attorney emphasized James's desire for involvement with his child and the family's ability to provide financial security and opportunities. When my turn came, Patricia focused on my right to raise my child free from Eleanor's controlling influence, detailing the pattern of manipulation and psychological pressure I had endured. Andrew followed with the legal precedents supporting our requests for limited visitation and the protective order against Eleanor. Throughout these presentations, I kept my gaze fixed on the judge, a no-nonsense woman in her 60s who revealed nothing in her expression. Only once did I glance toward the Sanders family, accidentally catching William's eye. He gave me a barely perceptible nod that could have meant anything or nothing. When the judge asked if either party wished to make a personal statement, James stood unexpectedly. "Your Honor, if I may," he began, his voice uncharacteristically uncertain. "I want to say that I still love my wife. I never wanted this divorce. I believe we could have worked things out if given the chance." My heart clenched painfully at his words. How could he still not see the truth? "Mr. Sanders," the judge replied, "your feelings are noted, but the court is more concerned with actions than sentiments. Ms. Winters has presented substantial evidence that your actions did not support your claimed affections." James sat down chastened. The judge then turned to me. "Mrs. Sanders, do you wish to make a statement?" I stood carefully, one hand supporting my belly. "I love James deeply, Your Honor, but I cannot raise a child in an environment where control is disguised as love and where intimidation is a family tradition. All I want now is the freedom to be a good mother without interference from those who view my child as a Sanders heir rather than as a person with their own future." The judge nodded thoughtfully. "I'll take a 15-minute recess before delivering my decision." As the judge left the courtroom, a tense silence fell. I remained seated, accepting a bottle of water from Sarah and trying to ignore the weight of Eleanor's stare from across the room. Patricia and Andrew conferred in whispers, reviewing notes and nodding occasionally. When the bailiff suddenly approached me, I felt a spike of anxiety. "Mrs. Sanders, there's an issue with some paperwork. The judge has requested you come to her chambers briefly." Patricia frowned. "This is irregular. I should accompany my client." "The judge specified Mrs. Sanders alone," the bailiff insisted. "It will only take a moment." Reluctantly, Patricia allowed me to go, promising to intervene if I wasn't back in 5 minutes. I followed the bailiff through a side door and down a corridor, my hand protectively on my belly. To my shock, the bailiff led me not to the judge's chambers, but to a small conference room where Eleanor Sanders waited alone. "What is this?" I demanded immediately, backing toward the door. "This is inappropriate." 5 minutes. Eleanor said, her voice lacking its usual imperial confidence. Please. Against my better judgment, I stayed positioning myself near the door. Say what you need to say quickly. My lawyer will be looking for me. Eleanor looked different somehow, her perfect facade showing cracks I'd never seen before. Her hands, usually so steady, trembled slightly as she clasped them before her. I've made a terrible mistake, she said, the words clearly difficult for her to form. Several, in fact. I waited silently, unwilling to make this easier for her. William told me he spoke to you, about Elizabeth. She paused, swallowing hard. What he probably didn't tell you was that her death was preventable. The doctors missed warning signs during my pregnancy. By the time the problem was discovered, it was too late. I watched my daughter die because someone wasn't paying proper attention. Despite everything, I felt a pang of sympathy for the grieving mother beneath the controlling matriarch. When James was born, I swore nothing like that would ever happen again. Every decision, every intervention in his life was to protect him from harm, from disappointment, from loss. Eleanor's composure slipped further. I convinced myself I was doing what any good mother would do. Threatening me and my family goes far beyond protection, I pointed out. Yes, she agreed, surprising me. It does, and I have no excuse for that behaviour. When I saw you pregnant with James's child, something broke in me. All I could see was potential danger, another loss waiting to happen. But my actions weren't about protection anymore. They were about control. She looked directly at me, her eyes bright with unshed tears. I was wrong, Thalia, terribly wrong. And I'm asking, not for forgiveness, because I don't deserve that, but for a chance to make amends, to be a grandmother to your child in whatever limited way you deem appropriate. I studied her face, looking for signs of manipulation or insincerity. Why this sudden change? Why now? Because William finally showed me what I've become, what I've done to my son, to you. A single tear escaped, tracking down her perfectly made-up face. And because I realized I was about to lose my only grandchild the same way I lost my daughter, through my own actions. Before I could respond, the door opened and Patricia burst in, followed by the real bailiff. This is completely inappropriate, she declared, taking my arm protectively. We'll be reporting this to the judge immediately. As Patricia led me out, Eleanor called after me. Thalia, please, I'm getting help, professional help, I just want a chance. Back in the courtroom, Patricia was furiously explaining the situation to the judge, who looked appropriately concerned. Mrs. Sanders Sr., the judge addressed Eleanor sternly when she returned to her seat. Attempting to interfere with these proceedings will not help your case. In fact, it reinforces the concerns raised about your behaviour. Eleanor nodded, accepting the rebuke with uncharacteristic humility. When the judge delivered her ruling, it was largely in my favour. The divorce was granted with primary custody awarded to me and limited supervised visitation for James. Most importantly, a restraining order was issued preventing Eleanor from contacting me directly or interfering in decisions regarding the child. However, the judge added, the court recognises the importance of family connections. Once the child is born and a period of 6 months has passed, Mr. and Mrs. Sanders may petition for grandparent visitation rights, provided they can demonstrate that they have respected the boundaries established today. As the ruling was read, I watched Eleanor's face. Instead of the fury or determination I expected, I saw something that looked almost like acceptance tinged with sadness. Outside the courthouse, as rain continued to fall, William approached me, while Eleanor and James waited by their car. Thank you for hearing her out, he said quietly. She meant what she said in there. She's starting therapy next week. I hope it helps her, I replied honestly, but I need to focus on my baby now. William nodded. Of course, but when you're ready, if you're ever ready, know that there's a grandfather who would very much like to be part of your child's life. On your terms, not ours. 3 weeks later, I gave birth to a healthy baby girl whom I named Lily. James came to the hospital awkward, but genuinely moved as he held his daughter for the first time. She's perfect, he whispered, a tear sliding down his cheek. I'm so sorry, Thalia, for everything. She deserves better than what happened between us, I said. She deserves parents who respect each other, even if we couldn't stay together. James nodded solemnly. I'm in therapy too now, learning how to set boundaries with my mother. It's hard, but I want to be a good father to Lily, a father who can stand on his own. In the months that followed, I rebuilt my life piece by piece. I returned to teaching part-time, finding joy again in my kindergartners' smiling faces. I moved into a small but charming apartment with a nursery painted in soft yellows and greens. Sarah and my other friends formed a support network that helped me navigate the challenges of single motherhood. James kept his word, attending his supervised visitations faithfully and never trying to overstep the boundaries the court had established. He seemed genuinely committed to building a healthy relationship with Lily. 6 months after Lily's birth, I received a formal letter from William and Eleanor's new attorney requesting limited grandparent visitation rights. Enclosed was a separate personal note from Eleanor, along with documentation of her ongoing therapy. "I understand if you refuse," she wrote, "but I am working to become someone worthy of knowing your daughter, not as a Sanders heir, but as Lily, a precious child in her own right." After considerable thought and discussions with my own therapist, I agreed to a trial visit. 1 hour at a neutral location, with both James and myself present. I was prepared for the old Eleanor to emerge, for the control and manipulation to resurface. Instead, I witnessed something I never expected. Eleanor Sanders, humbled and genuine, sitting on the floor of a coffee shop play area, simply being present with her granddaughter. No designer clothes, no imperious attitude, just a grandmother watching Lily with wonder and respect. "She has your smile," Eleanor said softly to me. "Your kindness in her eyes." It wasn't forgiveness, not yet. But it was a beginning. A chance for Lily to know her family without the toxic patterns that had damaged her father. A chance for healing that I never thought possible. As I watched Eleanor carefully hand Lily back to me at the end of the visit, respecting my boundaries without complaint, I realized that sometimes the most profound transformations come from the most painful breaks. Eleanor had been shattered by the consequences of her own actions. But from that breaking had come the possibility of something healthier, something real. My own journey from fearful victim to strong independent mother had taught me that true family isn't about control or legacy or appearances. It's about respect, boundaries, and the courage to love without possessing. It's a lesson I would make sure Lily grew up understanding, whether or not the Sanders family remained part of our lives. In the end, I discovered that breaking free from toxic control wasn't just an act of self-preservation. It was an act of love. Love for myself, love for my daughter, and perhaps in some complicated way, love for the broken family that had tried to break me. Because sometimes, when something breaks, it creates the space for something stronger to grow in its place. Have you ever had to make a difficult choice to protect yourself or someone you love from toxic control? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear that standing up for yourself isn't selfish. It's necessary. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember that sometimes the hardest choices lead to the most beautiful beginnings.